Salvador Dali's childhood seems to be taken from a movie with elements of mysticism and drama. To understand his strange behavior and unique style, you need to look into his early years, where there are dark pages that shaped his personality. Salvador was the second child in the family. Before him, his parents already had a son, who was also named Salvador, but he died at the age of 2. This left a deep mark in the life of the future artist. His mother believed that he was the reincarnation of their first son. She told this to the boy, repeating that he was the rebirth of his deceased brother. Dali grew up from childhood with the feeling that someone else lived in him, that he had to replace this first Salvador. This had a profound effect on his psyche. He could not understand who he was and began to look for confirmation of his unique, strange self in everything he did. He later recalled that this gave him a sense of destiny, but also heightened his fears and inner contradictions. Another striking feature of Dali's childhood was his father's complex and rigid role in his upbringing. Salvador's father, a man with a firm character, wanted his son to be strong and not afraid of the world. To toughen the boy, he showed him gruesome photos and books with images of serious illnesses and injuries. Salvador had to look at mutilated faces and bodies, which horrified him, but his father thought that this way the boy would become stronger and learn to cope with his fears. These terrible images are deeply imprinted in the memory of little Dali and probably became the basis for many of his creepy and strange paintings. His father thus tried to bring him up in an unusual, albeit cruel way. Later, Dali used images of bodies and strange shapes in his art, which gave rise to his famous scary style. Even as a child, Salvador was not like others. He realized that the world looked at him differently and began to create an image for himself that would separate him from everyone else. He first made shock a part of his personality, even in his school years. For example, he tried to subdue teachers by behaving in a defiant and even frightening way. From an early age, he was already that Dali, who felt he had to be unique, unrepeatable. Mother and father, both in their own way, wanted to bring up a special son, but their methods only increased Salvador's internal contradictions and loneliness. In the end, all of this, fears, a sense of his exceptionalism, images of illness, gave the world an artist whose works are filled with disturbing, mystical symbols. Every melting hour or blurred figure in his paintings is a reflection of his own childhood traumas. In addition, he was always looking for something else to surprise the public because he felt misunderstood, lonely, and lost. Salvador Dali was not only a talented artist, but also a true master of provocation. His life was full of oddities that today may even seem shocking. Some people thought he was crazy, others thought he was a genius who simply saw the world differently. But what were his habits that surprised everyone around him? First of all, Dali loved to be the center of attention. He always wanted to be noticed and came up with the most unusual ways to do it. For example, he carried a tiny golden bell and rang it when he wanted people to pay attention to him. Imagine, on a crowded street or in a restaurant, suddenly rings. Everyone turns around and there's Dali with a smug smile. It was his way of saying, "I'm here, look at me." This bell became his personal symbol, and he often wore it even when traveling. Another strange habit of Dali's was his approach to sleep. Like many creative people, he looked for ways to be inspired and drew ideas from the most unusual places. Ordinary sleep did not suit him. He believed that during sleep was losing time that could be spent on creativity. So he came up with the micro-sleep technique. During the day, he would fall asleep for just a couple of seconds, and that was enough for him to reboot his brain. According to him, such flashes of sleep helped him to create new ideas and paintings. Dali claimed that sometimes he slept only 1 to 2 hours a night to stay in such a half-awake state and be ready for new ideas. Of course, this is not good for everyone, but for Dali, this technique became a source of inspiration. Such habits formed his image of a genius on the edge, where madness was part of creativity. It was as if Dali deliberately repelled people with his oddities to always remain an enigma. Perhaps it is this line between genius and absurdity made him so famous. The question remains open. Was he like this by nature, or did he create this image himself? Salvador Dali was eccentric in everything, and in love too. One day he met a woman who completely changed his life and became his inspiration for many years. Her name was Gala, and for her sake he was ready for anything. But their love was far from simple. It was a story of passion, strangeness, and unusual arrangements. When Dali and Gala met, she was already in her 30s, and he was only 25. Gala was married to the poet Paul Eluard, but for the sake of Dali, she decided to leave her husband. Interestingly, Dali at that time considered himself very afraid of women, and even said that he was afraid to enter into a relationship. And yet, Gala became an exception. She became for him the person who not only supported him as an artist, but also helped him to open up as a person. Dali said that without her he would not be himself, and signed his paintings Gala Salvador Dali, emphasizing that they are one. But their relationship was very unusual. Gala was not just a wife and assistant, she literally ran his life. She took on the business, finances, and often helped him in making important decisions. Dali called her his queen and obeyed her in everything. But this was no ordinary obedience. There was a real relationship contract between them. They decided that their marriage would be open, that is, each could have affairs on the side. Gala enjoyed this right and even got a separate house where she brought her lovers. Dali knew about this and, moreover, approved. He thought that her independence and strength make her even more special and attractive. Such a relationship looked strange to many people, but to them it was the perfect partnership. Gala did not just accept Dali's oddities, she enhanced them, helped him feel free in his genius. In return, he allowed her to live as she wanted and completely trusted her. It may seem that such love was too pragmatic or even cruel, but for Dali it was salvation. He could be himself, and Gala became the anchor that kept him afloat. Their story is not a story of normal love, but perhaps that is why it made him so great. One of the most famous symbols in Dali's work is the melting clock in the painting, The Permanence of Memory. This painting puzzled many people. Why do clocks flow like melted wax? It turns out that the idea came to Dali unexpectedly. One evening he saw a piece of camembert, a soft cheese melting in the sun. This image led him to the idea of the instability and relativity of time. In Dali's opinion, time is not a rigid and unchanging parameter, as is commonly thought, but something flexible, changing under the influence of our sensations and perception. Clocks seem to lose their shape and flow away, just like our memories of the past or our perceptions of the future. It is as if Dali wanted to say that time is an illusion and we cannot rely on it. But Dali's unusual images don't stop there. Another curious object created by the artist is the lip sofa. The idea of a sofa in the shape of lips appeared to Dali when he admired the beauty of actress Mae West. Her lips seemed to him a perfect example of femininity, and he decided to immortalize them by creating a sofa in their shape. What's more, he even went further. He designed an entire room in the style of her face. The sofa sponge was a mouth. The walls resembled facial features, and on the wall hung paintings that looked like eyes. This interior was a true embodiment of the surrealist approach to design and still inspires contemporary artists. Such strange images were not accidental. Dali believed that art should excite, shock, and even scare a little. He said that every object around us could be translated into a symbol. For example, a clock is not just a device that shows the time, but something more that makes us think about the essence of time and life. Or a sofa. It can be not just furniture, but something attractive, like the lips of an actress that you want to remember. That is why his works are full of strange and shocking symbols that remain in the memory for a long time. And although at first glance it seems that these images are created simply for appetite, they have a deep meaning. Dali wanted to show that the world is not as simple as it seems, and every object can carry something important and unusual. It was as if he was saying to his viewers, "Look at the world differently. Pay attention to the details." Salvador Dali was not only a famous artist, but also a master of scandal. He loved to apathetize the public and always found unusual ways to surprise or shock people around him. His behavior seemed strange to many, but this is what made him recognizable and legendary. One of the most famous cases occurred at a scientific conference where Dali was supposed to speak. But instead of going on stage in normal clothes, he appeared in a spacesuit for deep-sea diving. When asked why he wore such a suit, Dali calmly replied that he was diving into the depths of the unconscious. This was so unexpected that the audience burst into applause. However, it soon turned out that the spacesuit was very heavy and airtight, and Dali began to suffocate. No one immediately realized what was happening, and the artist himself panicked, trying to free himself. Eventually, he was helped to remove his helmet and was able to breathe normally. With this act, he attracted attention and established a reputation for himself as a man who is ready to do anything for the sake of art, even risk his life. Such actions made Dali a legend. It is as if he deliberately created his reputation as an eccentric genius, a man who is more important to shock than to please the public. Many believed that his oddities, this is just part of the image, but perhaps it was his way of staying true to himself. As a result, his every move, every public appearance was carefully thought out. It was as if he was saying to people, "See, I'm different from everyone else." Salvador Dali not only created hundreds of colorful paintings, but also left behind such a strong legacy that his influence is still felt in art, fashion, and even in our everyday culture. His paintings have become true masterpieces that are valued in the millions of dollars. Dali's paintings are held in major museums around the world, including the Dali Museum in Spain, and are visited by thousands of fans every year. People from all over the world come to see his famous melting clocks, strange figures, and surreal images. It is amazing that even decades after his death, his work remains relevant and interesting. Dali was able to create a style that is hard to confuse with anything else. He invented his own visual language, and this language is spoken by several generations of artists, designers, and filmmakers. But his legacy is not only his paintings. Dali himself was a true work of art. His mannerisms, his appearance, even his mustache became recognizable elements. To this day, we still see his influence in fashion, advertising, and even design. The famous goofy sofas or interior solutions inspired by surrealism continue to be used in modern design. He showed that art doesn't have to be serious. It can be colorful, shocking, and even a little funny. In the end, Dali's legacy is more than just paintings. It is a huge cultural contribution. He proved that it is possible to be unusual and daring and still be recognized. His legacy inspires artists and creative people who see him as an example of a man who was not afraid to be himself. Dali left the world not only his art, but also an entire philosophy built on the idea that each person can and should be unique.